Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Hi, so good to see everybody. It
Hey,
feels like we haven't had class in about a year. So hopefully you're excited to be here.
I think you have two screens up here. It shows.
I have two screens.
I mean, like where it shows the list of people.
Yeah, I have
It
no
has
idea.
two. Oh. Okay.
I'm baffled by technology. I'm not horrible, but I'm certainly not good. So,
Well, it's black, so I don't think it makes a difference.
well, not much I can do about it anyways. Okay, share screen, desktop. And I really hate Zoom. And now look at that. That's so weird. Do you see all of those? Do you guys see all of these multiple windows opening up?
it probably has to do with your doppelganger logged in.
Maybe. Okay, I'm sorry, folks. I'm going to sign out and I'll sign back in and see if that makes a difference. Hold on. Maybe it's going to go. Oh, no, it's going to do the same thing. I'll just sign out. Sorry, folks. Am I still here? I'm so sorry, everyone. I can't decide if I'm here or not. Can you hear
You're
me?
here. You're here. Yeah,
Okay. Can you see my PowerPoint?
I can. Yeah.
Okay. There, we're all good. Okay. So, I'm going to start off by saying that teaching pronunciation is my favorite part of teaching English, which seems bizarre because certain topics get popular and then they come and they go, and teaching pronunciation and teaching people how to pronounce things is kind of old fashioned at the moment. So the big money topic, like I've told you before, is teaching vocabulary. Pronunciation was really popular in the 80s. It waned off in the 90s, but it's still my favorite thing to teach. I think it has far more reaching places and spaces than it's given credit for. Do you think that this is recording, you guys? Do you see a record button?
I see it recording. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's up in the corner.
Good, because I don't want that to happen again where I misrecord. Okay, so we'll start off by having our land acknowledgement. The University of Alberta acknowledges that we are located on Treaty 6 territory and respects the histories, languages, and cultures of First Nations, Métis, Inuit, and all First Peoples of Canada, whose presence continues to enrich our vibrant community. And so again, this currently applies to Teacher Quality Standard number 3, which is about a professional body of knowledge. And so teaching pronunciation can be really effective and it can help other areas of language acquisition as well. But the thing is, you have to be strategic in what you do. And so if you have ideas about how to plan your teaching, then it's very easy to add in elements of pronunciation. But if you're not thinking about how to add in those pieces, you'll often forget about it. and it's to the detriment of the students. So you'll understand exactly right, is we're going to start off by talking about the Zoom. Hello, folks.
Hi, I was
Hello?
frozen there for a second.
Okay, did you guys hear the agenda?
Nope.
No.
Okay, so we'll talk about the Zoom principle. We'll talk about some conversation structures, some suprasegmentals. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of that term before. Some consonants and vowels. These things are all part of pronunciation. Have you guys heard of any of them?
Like the items in the agenda. I've heard of consonants
items-
and vowels.
Okay, so perfect. So this is going to be a great, interesting, fantastic lecture for you guys, provided my internet holds out. The book that I've taken all of tonight's lecture from is this one called Teaching American English Pronunciation. And if there was one book where I was going to recommend that you would buy, it would be this one. My copy was done in 2006, 2007, I think. I'm not even sure if this book is still in print, but it's one of the best teaching books I've ever had in my life. So I highly recommend, if you're going to buy something, this would be the one to buy. It's got all kinds of activities in it that will help you be an excellent pronunciation teacher. And in my estimation, teaching pronunciation is the key to teaching people phonics, which is part of reading, right? So they're all of these things tie together. And pronunciation has a part in reading. It obviously has a part in speaking, and it's kind of a topic on its own as well. So any questions thus far?
Nope. No questions so
Oh.
far.
Okay, so we're going to start off by talking about the Zoom principle. And the Zoom principle has nothing to do with Zoom, that everybody doing things online. It's that you go from the outermost to the most specific. And so when you're teaching pronunciation, there's some key things. You should always teach pronunciation in the context of communication. So pronunciation isn't always taught. Sometimes when pronunciation is taught, people will have a specific class and you'll go to class to learn how to pronounce. But the Zoom principle says, I find I need to learn this. I need to learn pronunciation when I'm communicating with people. So when I realize that I'm communicating with people and I make mistakes, that is the moment to kind of tackle pronunciation problems. So again, with the Zoom principle, you always go from the outside in. So you move from the most global mistakes to the most specific mistakes. And so it's often that people want to do the opposite. People want correction on things that are specific, but usually if you can solve kind of the big problems in a sentence, that will help you more than something's more general. So for example, if you're doing public speaking and conversation structure, you're working on suprasegmentals, and then you move eventually down to specific sounds. So you're teaching kind of stress, intonation, rhythm, all of those things before you're teaching k, p, b, l, right? So again, the big global rhythm of a language before you move to the actual consonants and vowels, okay? And when you're teaching pronunciation, you should be working with generalizable outcomes before exceptions. And so all of these are kind of things that teachers we kind of like to focus on the exceptions, but it's always better to be thinking about the general rule first. And then once people have got the rule down, then you work towards the exceptions. And there are 3 ways that they talk about collecting pronunciation samples from students. So you can do surveys, you can ask them, you can just have them do speech, like you're taking people in a conversation, you're recording their conversation, and then you have them read. So if you're having students ask questions and find out information, you're having people just generally talk and listen for mistakes, or you're reading, they're all going to give you slightly different pieces of information. So, for example, if I'm speaking, I might have really good rhythm and intonation because I can get feedback from you as we're communicating. If I'm reading, I can have lots of time to think about how I'm supposed to do this, and I can pronounce, and I can practice, sorry. And furthermore, like if I'm asking people questions about what they think their mistakes are, that they're going to tell me things that I might not otherwise recognize. So thinking about all of these things helps you to just kind of give a roundabout score for students' abilities. And as you know, that's going to be something that you do when you do your benchmark assessment for students when you're finally your professional ESL self. So if you're thinking about public speaking and you're trying to teach students how to do public speaking, you need to make sure that they know that public speaking has to be formal and that there's a big difference between formal and informal speaking. Grammar and pronunciation become very important in public speaking, but generally you also have you have time to work on those things. It's very rare you get up to do public speaking where you don't have a chance to practice, at least in theory, what it is you want to say. Even if you're a polished politician, you're thinking about what you want to say as you're walking up to the podium. So grammar and intonation become very important, as well as things like eye contact, body language. All of those things help you maintain a relationship with your audience. And all of these things can be taught, right? Pausing is important. So when you're doing public speaking, knowing when to stop is equally as important as knowing when to speak. If you don't give people the chance to think about what you're saying, then, and you don't give timing, they're not going to be able to understand all of your message. Clarity is really important, and nerve management is also important. So if you're doing public speaking, you're going up to do a speech in front of a crowd, you need to be able to think about all of these things. And all of the things here, like I said in this list, are things that you can teach students. You can teach them the difference between what's formal English and what's informal English. You can teach them correct grammar and pronunciation. You can teach eye contact and body language. You can teach pausing by putting things by teaching pronunciation and having them read that. And you can help them make messages clear. And and there's a million strategies for nerve management as well. Are there any questions up to this part? I'm nervous now because I don't know if I'm having an internet issue or if you guys are just taking this all in.
Just taking it all in, Trudy. It's all good.
Okay, so here is what you guys have probably learned how to do formal talks, or you have some information about that. But here's where you might not have had instruction. So I don't know if anybody has ever taught you how to have a conversation before. And so this is I don't know that you will find this in any text, but it's something that I find really helpful to explain to ESL learners. So if you're teaching people to have conversations conversations have a pattern. And once you know this general pattern, it's easy to make sure that you can keep a conversation going. And so often ESL students, they have conversations that are based on bowling. And whereas native speakers who are having a conversation with each other have a conversation that's based on ping pong. So if we're thinking about these two sports as analogies, if you're doing bowling, you stand at one end and you throw the ball and the ball hits the pins. And then eventually the ball comes back to you. The pins do nothing for you other than get knocked down. So in English, when we have bowl, and I believe this is true in other languages as well, when we have bowling conversations, they're in one direction. So how are you today? I'm fine. Oh, so what did you do this afternoon? I went to the store. Oh, okay, that was great. So did you buy anything? I bought coffee. That's not a conversation. And so when you have this kind of structure, conversation structure, it's usually because there's an imbalance of power. So if a policeman stops me, or policewoman, we're going to not be sexist, if I get pulled over because I'm driving too fast and the police officer asks me questions, I am not going to ask them questions back. Do you know how fast you were speeding? Yes. Can I see your license and registration? Yes. Have you been drinking? No, right? So I would be answering those questions because in that moment, there's an imbalance of power, right? So I'm not trying to engage with the other person. Again, if people are fighting, they will often do this, right? And again, this is like my married people joke. Married people, you're in trouble when, right? So how are you tonight? Or how are you? What do you think about this? If your spouse is not answering you back, you might just be in trouble, right? And then again, if you don't want to engage with somebody, you're not going to ping pong with them. So if there's that crazy, the crazy bird lady at the bus stop or whatever, and you really don't want to engage with somebody, you don't ask them questions back, right? But the opposite is true in ping pong. So if you can teach students this pattern, you can have students engage in conversation relatively easy and relative in just a few moments, right? Once they get this pattern back, this pattern. And so the question will go, oh, it's a great day today. Do you find it cold? And then the next person says, oh, no, I don't think it's cold at all. I think it's really lovely. I love when the weather is about -3. Do you like to ski? Oh, I hate skiing. I think skiing is the weirdest sport ever on the whole face of the planet. I think people should remain indoors. What do you like to do in the winter? Oh, I like to go shopping and spend time walking around West Edmonton Mall. Hey, it was great talking to you. I guess we'll see each other soon. Yeah, thanks. Bye. So if you can master this simple pattern, you can teach students to talk about the paint on the wall. I'm serious. So a person will start a conversation with a comment and then ask a question to the next person. The next person will answer that question. They'll make some kind of comment based on their answer, and then they will ask another question to the person. Again, the person answers, comments, and questions again. And finally, that will go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth until finally somebody says, hey, it was great seeing you. Talk to you later. Yeah, it was great seeing you too. And then both people will part ways. So I have a story about this. When I lived in Japan, my landlord, or my landlady actually, would always have conversations with me. And I can honestly say I have no idea what any of those conversations meant, because our conversation would go something like, if we're talking in the Charlie Brown teacher voice, wah, 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 elephant, wah, 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 gray, wah, 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 zoo. And then I would say, Oh, elephants are my favorite animals. I love the elephants that are in the zoo in Bueno Park. Have you been to Bueno Park recently? And then I would hear wah 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 wah, pink wah 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 wah, flowers wah 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 wah, backyard. And then I would take that. Oh, I like pink flowers. In Canada, we have lots of pink flowers. Are there lots of pink flowers in Japan? And then we would have this conversation where she would talk to me. I would be able to pull out one or two words out of her comment. I would be able to ask a question based on that, and we could have a conversation going, even though her Japanese way surpassed my skills to be able to communicate. So I'm not saying that you should teach people how to pretend to have conversations, but this is one of the way you get people to start engaging with the public. So this whole ping pong conversation here that I'm talking about, this all lends itself to basic interpersonal communication skills. This is all BICS. So what do you guys think about this? Are you there?
So are you outlining this because you want to emphasize that when we're teaching pronunciation, that it should be based around having good conversations that are ping pong in nature?
Well, I'm just saying you need to recognize that there's both of them, but this would be where you start teaching pronunciation. So you would start teaching pronunciation by teaching this kind of grammar or this kind of conversational structure. Because even if, as we go through, once you understand this structure, the suprasegmentals, you will see how they fit into this. And you can tell if somebody's asking you a question based on their intonation, right? And so the more that you understand the intonation, the more you will be able to do these things better. It kind of snowballs. So this is kind of the basic outliner of where you start when you teach conversation and when you teach pronunciation. Does that make sense, Tim?
Yeah, thanks.
Okay. So if you're talking about understanding stress, so there's a lot of things that, when I mean stress, obviously I don't mean, oh, I'm so nervous, I'm stressed. I'm talking about word stress. And so in English, we stress words by making them louder, longer, or clearer. Stress is really important for working memory because working memory usually is within the stress in words. So when we're listening to a sentence, we're listening for the stress. And we don't realize that we're doing this, but when we're listening to a sentence, we're listening for certain key words, and other words, we're kind of filling in the gaps in our brains between kind of those like little spaces. So word stress can be at the sentence level, and it impacts all of the words around it. Content words typically get stress, and grammatical words do not. This is really important here. Content words typically get stress, and grammatical words do not. So if I'm reading the sentence, I would be saying content words typically get stress, grammatical words do not. So the key nouns usually and the key verbs are the ones that I would say louder, longer, and clearer, right? I wouldn't be focusing so much on typically and get in that sentence, right? And the equation of generally stressing content words and generally unstressing grammatical words needs to be structured to, or needs to be tied to the structure of the message. So for example, I'm going to go to DQ and buy myself an ice cream, right? So I normally would stress the things in the sentence that are the most important. And I wouldn't stress everything. So this is a little bit of practice, but students, when they're learning how when they're learning sentences, they need to be able to hear which words are the most stressed in English. And so one of the things that you can easily do to teach students stress, as when you can give them something that you need to read according to the content, and then as you're reading it out loud, have them just like take their pencil and tick the words that they think are the content words. Then once they do that, chances are those words that are stressed or that they think are the content words are the words that they need to learn for that topic. Okay, so that's the first thing. And so we all learned in school, I'm sure we all had that dictionary exercise where we'd be ticking off what the stress is on the syllable. The first thing to know is you have stress at the sentence level, and then the stress at the sentence level migrates down to the word level. So again, you have the grammar structure or the conversation structure, then you have the sentence level stress, and then you're working towards the word level stress. So you can see how you're going from the outside to the inside. Okay, hopefully you can see that. So here's some activities for teaching word stress. So if I have this sentence here, the ballerinas danced their performance beautifully, right? The elephants trumpeted their warning calls to the park rangers. So where would the words be stressed in this? So that's just one typical thing. So the noun tends to get the biggest stress. The verb tends to get slightly smaller stress than the noun. Then comes the noun and the adjective that goes along with it. But if we have this sentence in front of us, Ik promens lodged Smith tragically smidgenifully, right? It's total nonsense, right? So if I have this total nonsense, I can still figure out where the stress is based on English. So prompts would be the stressed word, and lodging did would probably be less stressed than prompts. And then tenderduradly, smignificantly. Okay, why I picked something that was so hard to pronounce, I have no idea when I made this sentence. So if here, the prompts would be the prompts, and the smignificantly would be the two words that would be the most stressed. And they would be stressed simply because of where their place is within the sentence. And so students can learn to predict where the stress is going to be. And so I'm not going to, that exercise that I wrote there, don't worry, I changed how I was making these slides as I was doing it, and I didn't want to change it afterwards. So anyhow, so that's what you need to know, is that you can teach students the basic structure of a sentence and how the stress happens in the sentence. And then you can get them to practice on real words. And then you can get them to practice on words that you have made up yourself. And just by predicting where that pattern is going to be in the sentence, they should be able to understand where to put the stress. Okay, so suprasegmentals, stress, intonation, and rhythm. So this is what a suprasegmental is. So that was what I was telling you right from the start. So you start off with conversation patterns, then you move to suprasegmentals. So we just talked about stress, but intonation is the up, and then stress is the louder. Intonation is the up and down, and rhythm is the ta-da, 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 ta-da. So intonation carries a lot of meaning, and it goes well beyond the word level. These elements of speech carry out the structure of a conversation. So if you're teaching people pronunciation, this is your money shot, right? This is where you spend your time teaching these things, and it's going to help everything else. So again here, if your native speakers don't understand your conversation structure, they're going to tune you out, and they're just not going to They're just not going to engage with you, right? If a native speaker doesn't understand your suprasegmentals, they don't understand what you're talking about. And if they don't understand your like consonants and vowels, they're just going to giggle, right? So if you have like a Japanese student and they start talking and they're going from one sentence to another and they're not asking questions back, or they're asking questions in the wrong spot, people are just going to stop listening to them. If they get their intonation wrong, they don't really understand what you're talking about. But if they mix up their L and their R, those things are generally pretty funny to native speakers, right? So if you have like one of my best friends in Japan, her husband always confused election and erection. That's hilarious, right? So these kinds of like phony mistakes that people make, everybody's so worried about making them, but generally people find them quite endearing. So it's not something that you should focus on hardcore fixing. You kind of have to hammer out the general things before you get to the specific things. And that's the one thing I need you guys to know more than anything else. Okay, so stress and rhythm, here's some ways that you can teach stress and rhythm. So in English, we'd have the sentence, birds eat worms. Birds eat worms. And then you can change the sentence without changing the stress. The birds can eat the worms. The birds can eat the worms. The birds can eat the worms. The early birds can noisily, now I've got it wrong. The early birds can noisily eat the worms. So you can have this sentence, you can have this really simple 3-word sentence. You can continue to add words without changing the stress. This is really helpful for students to learn this, right? And if you're a chemistry major, electrons are negative. Electrons are negative. And then I don't know anything about physics or chemistry or whatever. I don't even know if that's physics or chemistry, right? And then hydrogen electrons are negative. So you can just add extra things in without changing the stress, and that still builds the rhythm of the sentence. And so hopefully that's just a really simple activity. Here's another one that we do naturally, and we don't even know that we do this. So if I have the sentence, I am from Edmonton. I am from Edmonton. I am from Edmonton. I am from Edmonton. All of those sentences mean something different. So for example, I am from Edmonton, not my friend Bethany. I am from Edmonton, not I am from, not I was from Edmonton. I am from Edmonton. I am from Edmonton, not I am in Edmonton. I am from Edmonton, not Calgary. So all of these kinds of stresses that we put on each of these words are things that give information. So if we think about this, kind of this stress and information focus, this is really, really important in English, right? My brother is getting married. My brother is getting married. My brother is getting married. They all have different meanings. And so we can teach students how to think about that quite easily, okay? And so, and if we think about these sentences, where did he go? He went to Ottawa, right? Naturally, we would stress on the question, and then in the rest of the answer is directly related to the question. So where did he go? He went to Ottawa. How did he get there? He drove to Ottawa. So the stress in the answer has to be linked to the stress in the question. And that's something that ESL learners should be learning about quite quickly. Because if I ask the question, how did he get there? He drove to Ottawa. It sounds unnatural, right? So we need students to know exactly where to stress. Does that make sense? Is that helpful? Are you confused?
It's perfectly clear. Yeah.
Okay. I love teaching this stuff. Uh-oh, Tim, it's just you and I. So,
Oh, really?
Jess, well, according to me, that's all I have.
Yeah, oh, Gunjot came back.
Okay.
Hey, Gunjot, did you lose connection or something? Sorry, I didn't mean to hijack your class, Trudy.
No, I love it. I find this teaching online and talking to the ephemera so difficult.
I did see that though. It was just you and I, and then Gunjot just came back, but there were 5 of us a minute ago.
Well,
it's okay. I'm good.
Sorry, everyone. I don't know. It's probably my internet. I don't know. Jazz chants. I'm going to have you guys write your own jazz chant, but not tonight. That's one of the activities for this week. And jazz chants, I don't know if you've ever heard of them before. Have Gunjot or Tim, have you ever heard of jazz chants?
Is that like
No, I
the Will
haven't.
Ferrell, like the Will Ferrell sort of like Saturday Night Live bit? Is that like a jazz chant?
I have no idea. But jazz chants are, so there was this woman named Carolyn Graham who invented them in the 1980s. And so essentially what she did was take a certain thing that people need to practice in conversation, put it to a jazz rhythm, and then just kind of it just generically turned into this whole teaching method for teaching pronunciation. They can be fun because they're quick.
Can you say that again? Because it froze up for just a second. What did she say? What was this lady's?
She just took a few sentences that people would say, put them to music, and use this to teach pronunciation. So, okay, do you want a cup of coffee? Do you want a cup of coffee? Do you want a cup of coffee? Coffee with cream. And so she would just make up these kind of little sentences that students had to practice all the time, turning them into a song. And she used that to teach not necessarily music, but to teach rhythm and intonation. So it's so easy to use a jazz chant to make up something you can use in your class. If you're teaching a specific concept, like thou and they mean you okay, so I don't know why I'm pulling this out of my head, but if I'm thinking about Shakespeare had thou and thee to mean you. So it could be Shakespeare said thou and thee, I use you, la, la, la. And then you take that and then you've built that concept that you're teaching. At the same time, you've put it into intonation with proper stress and rhythm in English. So this is really great for beginners and young learners. And if you have adults, they'll be willing to do it. It's not always the easiest thing for high school teachers to get students to do jazz chants, but if you can get them to do it, especially key points, if you're trying to make students remember something really important in your class, turn it into a jazz chant. They will groan and pretend that they're not doing it, but in their head, when they're writing their test, you can hear them actually, like, you can watch them mouthing the jazz chant. It's a great way for remembering how to do something. You know, we all know that you turn something into a song, you remember it better. So if you're turning it into a song, just make sure this is your opportunity to use stress and rhythm and intonation. So there's this little video. I'm going to ask you to watch that video. And when you watch that video, it'll tell you about the history of jazz chants, and it will tell you about what kinds of things you put in and how you create your own. It's so simple. And she's made I don't know, she's published hundreds of books on the topic. So it's just something that is ubiquitous in ESL teaching. And it's good to know, especially if you're teaching beginners. Intonation. So intonation is the up and down of the sentence. It contains emotion, because we always think like when you're emotional, your sentences will go up and down. But there's also, it also tells you information about how to respond. So essentially, most sentences in English, at the end of the sentence, it will go down. And there's three kinds of things that we'll talk about. If we have people think, all native English speakers will think that yes, that all questions go up at the end. It is not true. No, 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 no. So native speakers, if I ask a who, what, where, when, or why question, those will go down. So what did you do yesterday? When are you going to go to the store? How do you turn an internet blockage problem into a solution, right? All of those questions are going to go down. And if you make them rise at the end, you're kind of changing the meaning of the question. So if you have like, who's your best friend, is very different than who's your best friend. If I say, who's your best friend? It's kind of, I'm trying to entice you into saying me, right? Like there's, anyhow, my general point is who, what, where, when, why, and how questions go down. But yes, no questions go up. So do you like broccoli? Because that's a yes, no question, it will go up. So it's very easy to teach students this. And then they know if they can predict that the question's rising, they know they have to answer yes or no. And if it's who, what, where, when, and why, then that becomes a question of stress, right? We stress those question words, and then we stress the answers in the answers. Tag questions, though, are the opposite. So a tag question is, are you? So, or do you? Like, do you like broccoli? I heard you like broccoli. Do you? That means like, I'm not sure if that's true information or not. I'm trying to get that information out of you, or like, so I'll go on to the next slide and it'll become a little bit clearer. So if I have a list of items, the sentences, the words in the sentence are always going to go up, up, and then when I get to the last thing, down. So I want to be famous, rich, and powerful. Last year, she went to New York, Brazil, Athens, Hanoi, and Hong Kong, right? So if I have this sentence here, I speak French, Japanese, Vietnamese, Spanish, and of course, English. So it's always up, 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 down. And this is helpful for students to know. Native speakers, this is our indication that this is the end of the list, right? The down means there's no more list. So I went to New York, Brazil, Athens, Hanoi, Toronto, Istanbul, and Hong Kong, right? So as soon as I get to the following, that means I know that there's no more things coming. English people are not even aware that they do this, but it's good to teach ESL students this because this is the natural pattern of communication that people have. Did you guys know that you did this?
No, it didn't even occur to me.
So this is really helpful to know, right? So it doesn't work the same in every language, but this is how it works in English. Okay, so tag questions, again, they can rise or fall depending on the message, right? The Oilers are a great hockey team, aren't they? I'm looking to find out if you think the Oilers are a great hockey team. The Oilers are a great hockey team, aren't they? Right? I'm trying to get you to have a conversation with me. So the point is here is that at the end, we have these kinds of intonations that go into sentences, and we call those tag questions. And tag questions are incredibly difficult in English. So if you are trying to get information from an ESL learner, the last thing you should do is ask them tag questions, because they never know if they're supposed to answer yes or no. So it's much better for a beginner student, instead of saying, the Oilers are a great hockey team, aren't they? To say, do you think the Oilers are a great hockey team? Right? So try and avoid tag questions with beginners. That's my advice. But the intonation can change depending on the message you want. In reductions, so in English, if a word is stressed, it gets pronounced differently. So can I have it versus he can go to the shop and buy another one. So can I have it? Can is the beginning. It's an important word in that question. So that word gets stressed. He can go to the shop. I most likely would not say he can go to the shop. I'd say he can, right? I would totally eliminate that A sound in that word, right? Well, I wouldn't eliminate it. I would morph it to something else, but he can go to the shop and buy another one. So the word can isn't always consistently pronounced as can, is my point. And will you please do your assignment versus the monkey will jump from a tree, right? So will, again, is a focus word. So it will have a clear pronunciation, but the monkey will jump from the tree. The will almost becomes, it doesn't get heard as clearly as it does in the first one. And these words can change in the following way. So if the vowel sound switches to schwa, schwa means right? A cup of coffee, a cup, a cup of coffee, right? So the word of becomes a. And the word if I'm trying to pronounce formally, I would say a cup of coffee. But in normal speech between normal native speakers, it'd be a cup of coffee, right? And certain consonants can be lost. So give it to them, right? I don't even pronounce the TH in them. Give it to them. And the final consonant can disappear completely, especially in really short words like of and. So coffee and cream, I wouldn't pronounce the D in cream, right? Or I wouldn't pronounce the D in and, coffee and cream. So we do all of these things naturally, and we're not even aware that we're doing them. Now, so like I said, we start off with conversation patterns. We move into generalized stress in the sentence. Once we move from generalized stress in the sentence, we look at specific words. And then once we get to specific words, we're looking at specific sounds. And specific sounds, we're not worried so much about specific sounds because most native speakers of English anyways, if we hear kind of mispronunciation within specific sounds, we kind of think it's cute, right? So we're not looking to focus all of our time and effort here. But here's some key things to know. If you're teaching people how to make a k sound, you better make sure you also teach them all of the different ways you can spell k. So k can be spelled with a C as in cake, or it can be spelled with a k as in karate, or it can be spelled with a k as in kick at the end, or it can be spelled as ch as in school, right? So that one sound can have 4 different spellings, right? So try to make generalizable rules. Sometimes pronunciation is tied to grammar. And so, for instance, I don't know if you know this, but ED on the ends of words can be pronounced 3 different ways, right? So I listened would be ED, I danced would be D, and I talked would be a T sound, right? And plural nouns can either end in z or iz. So like classes, dances, feels, right? So they can be pronounced in all three different those things. It's helpful if you're teaching consonants. You should always teach consonants before you teach vowels. Vowels in English are incredibly difficult to pronounce because we have a, e, I, a, e, I, o, u, and so they're all in like it's all tongue work, and they're challenging. If you're teaching people consonants, it's helpful to use a mirror so that they can actually they can look at your face, they can see the way that you're holding your mouth, and they can try and hold their mouth the same. Like I said here, vowels are much more difficult to teach than consonants, and short vowels versus long vowel sounds. So short vowels are a, e, I, and long vowel sounds are a, e, I, o, u, and they're the ones that say their name. So short vowels, a, e, I, those are all one a, e, I, o, u, and a long vowel sound is generally a, I, e, e. Like they're usually two vowel sounds written together to make the vowels, to make the letters say their name. So it's helpful to teach spelling patterns at the same time you're teaching sounds. But what happens so often in an ESL class is right from the beginning of a class, teachers are trying to teach students, can you say the difference between bit and beat? And students are practicing bit, beat. They can't tell them apart. They don't hear them apart. Instead of focusing on the bigger picture of getting people into conversations, and then they're worrying about kind of these kind of tiny little discrete things that don't really help students until they're much further down their language journey. So here is something I don't know if you've ever been taught before. Can you tell the difference between the teens and the T's when you're teaching like, can you, again, all native speakers hear this, but most don't know how to teach this because they internally know it, but they don't know that they know it. So for instance, if you have a teen number, the stress of the word goes on the teen. If you have a T number, the stress goes on the first syllable. So you would say 12, but 20. You would say 13 versus 30, 14 versus 40, 15 versus 50, 16 versus 60. Have you guys ever heard this before?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm just pointing this out for you guys that there's that information. So here, I just want to show the benchmarks for pronunciation. So if you're looking kind of from levels 1 to levels 5, right? You're looking at they're trying to work on English sounds. They're looking for familiar routines. Pronunciations can have people have mistakes, right? But those mistakes cause people to not understand. By the time you're getting into level 2, you're developing that English rhythm, that stress, that intonation, that language for classroom routines. And again, this is all part of BICS, right? Basic interpersonal communication skills. So by the time they start getting this BICS down, right? Then they're moving into comprehensible pronunciation. Their rhythm is getting good. Their intonation is getting good. And then they still might make mistakes, but generally speaking, people can understand the majority of what they're saying. And then by the time we get into level 5, pretty much everything they say, we can understand. It doesn't matter that they have an accent. An accent isn't considered bad, but we see that they're working towards, like, a native speaker is not going to have any trouble understanding what it is that they have to say, right? So again, we'll move on to like 7 to 9. And again, it's pretty much the exact same thing. So again, you can see that they start off working on rhythm and intonation. They're working into comprehensible pronunciation. Then that's still working. They're still working on that. And by the time they're up to level 5, their pronunciation, you can pretty much understand everything that it is that they say. So if you're trying to teach people, how to pronounce certain, let me think, how did I want to say that? If you're practicing teaching people things like, it's a nice day today, isn't it? It's a great day, it's a beautiful day, it's a nice day today, isn't it? You're looking at kind of things that are working on the level 1. But by the time you get into level 5, you're probably not teaching those kinds of sounds as much as you're teaching, okay, here you're standing in front of the class doing a formal presentation. In order to do this, here is how you put stress on the content words so people understand your speech better, right? So you're looking at, it's more about delivery and fine tuning. Again, from grade 10 to 12, that is the same kind of level that we have there. You guys can have a look at that. And that's all I have for us for tonight. So I'm going to stop sharing. Okay, so any questions? Interesting, fun? Do you like it? Do you not like it? Gunjot, I know you're there, but I don't know if Jessica and Tim are there.
I'm here. I like that there's like some methodology to actually teaching pronunciation, because I don't know, I live in a house where I'm in an easy position. I can correct people's English all the time, but I didn't know that there was some sort of, method that would actually help improve. So it was great.
Good, thank you. Jessica?
I'm just like at a Tim Hortons right now, but like I had to leave halfway through just because it was noisy. But like, yeah, I think it was interesting to see that there is like a sort of method, just like what Tim said.
Well, thanks.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead, Jessica.
I was just going to comment that there's so many things that as a native English speaker, you don't even think about. And it's nice that you bring it up, because sometimes you just don't realize it. And definitely there's some things that I'm just like, what? It's just automatic.
Well, I know, and I can't hear stress and intonation in sentences. Like I just can't. I've taken courses in this, and I'll totally get it wrong every time. Right? So I think it goes down, 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 up, and then I've realized that it's up, 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 down. Like, just because I can do it normally in speech, but I just can't hear it. So for me, knowing that those patterns exist is really helpful, because I can look in the book and I can find the patterns to teach people, but otherwise I'll be teaching them the wrong way. So that's me, right? But I think most people have a better understanding or ability to do it, right? So maybe you guys are just naturally better at it than I am. I don't know.
Well, even when you had pronounced the 3 different ways that English native speakers pronounce ED, like there's 3 different ways to pronounce it, it sounded like 2 to me. I couldn't even hear the difference between.
I could have picked the wrong examples too, but no, there's
I agree.
definitely, I did it wrong maybe,
I don't know.
but either way, the point is you guys can now Google the 3 different ways to pronounce ED in English, and you'll find it, and it will be in every ESL textbook. Like talked definitely ends in a T. right? If it has a K sound, the ending sound is going to be a T. Talked, walked, danced, danced. So it depends on the sound that precedes it. So if it's a K sound, it's going to be a T at the end. And if it would be like jogged, it would be a D. So a K or a G. No, a G would be a D and a K would be a T, because you're already got the K part. So you're already aspirating. So the T has to aspirate with it. Pronunciation is fantastic. I'm serious. If you guys are interested, try and buy a copy of that book. I don't even know if it's in print anymore, but it's a great book. So, not that I'm telling you to buy anything, but if there's one thing you wanted to buy out of this course, that would be it. So,
Which book is that again?
it's going to be in the PowerPoint slides.
Okay. Okay.
It's called Teaching American English Pronunciation. And so our pronunciation, by the way, is when they say American, it's North American. And it's got American in the title, probably because that's what sells most. But I think Avery and Ehrlich, the people who wrote the book, are actually Canadian. And there's regional differences in English across North America.
I was just gonna say, yeah, like who's who's American English?
Standard. There's hello.
Oh, you just
You
cut
froze
out
up
there.
for
I
a
think you
little
were,
bit. Yeah.
yeah,
Sorry.
you were just gonna,
Um,
I was just saying that who's American English, and you said that there's standard American English?
There's standard American English. Like if a radio announcer is generally not going to have a Kentucky accent, right? And like, so we normally, even Newfoundlanders wouldn't have a really strong Newfoundland accent when they're doing a TV show, right? So it's like, what would be typical for being on a TV show would kind of be the kind of benchmark, right? So I think generally speaking, we're far more alike than we are different. And that's why for us, it's so hard to tell apart Australians and New Zealanders and South Africans and British people. Like often we can't tell the difference. They can tell it better because they have more things in common so that it's easier for them to tease out what's different. Whereas opposed to us, it's all similar, it's all different sounding, so we can't figure out which thing belongs to which person. So yeah, it's interesting stuff. So my suggestion is like, I think everybody should have to take a course in linguistics. I think that will teach you more about being a good reading teacher, a good writing teacher, a good pronunciation teacher than anything else you can take in university. Was this like one of the courses I took as an undergrad in linguistics taught me more about teaching than all of my curriculum courses, right? Just because you learn so much and you learn the details and nuances in language, it's fascinating.
Yeah, I agree. I took a linguistics 101 since that is, I guess, needed for other courses. And that was very, very, I enjoyed it a lot. But like you said, I kind of forgot it. And then you brought a lot of the stuff up again. And I remembered again, because I just don't realize that people actually like that intonation and all that stuff. You never really realize it since you speak English all the time or hear it all the time.
I love it. I love it. So anyhow, if you guys don't have any questions, I guess we're done for tonight, but thank you so much for coming. I'm so glad that you guys were here. And I don't tell you that enough, but it's so hard to talk to the air. So thank you for being here and being my audience.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, have a
Thank
good night.
you. Have a good night.
See you guys.
Bye.
See you. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Trudy, could I chat with you for just 2 seconds before you sign off?
Yeah, I'm not signing